We got married yesterday. It was just for the inner circle. Kayla's words fell like a blade, sharp, calm, and so casual that for a moment I thought I'd misheard. I was still holding the old landline phone, someone's laughter echoing faintly on the other end, while my daughter-in-law sat right in front of me, legs crossed on the sofa I'd bought for them, holding the glass of orange juice I had just poured. Inner circle. Those two words rang in my head like a belated alarm. I, the one who paid their apartment rent for 3 years straight, $950 a month without missing a single payment, bought every piece of furniture, every nonstick pan, every curtain, every box of milk when they had no money left, was not part of the inner circle. Aaron, my only son, stood by the window, avoiding my eyes as if he were watching the rain outside instead of the woman who had raised him for 35 years. On the couch, Kayla smiled lightly, the kind of smile someone gives when they've just declared victory but still pretend it's nothing. I saw it all: the white wedding dress in the photo they posted online, the small party with Kayla's parents and a few of their friends, the 3-tier cake, the champagne glasses raised, the radiant look on Aaron's face that I had once dreamed of seeing on his wedding day. And the ivory dress I had ordered from that small boutique on King Street for $260 still hung in the closet, never worn. The new leather shoes I picked because the salesgirl said they looked elegant and age-appropriate still sat in their box, next to the unsigned wedding card. I had cleaned the house, cooked a pot of Southern-style chicken stew, thinking they'd stop by after the ceremony. I had even prepared an envelope with a check for $1,200, the first wedding gift from a single mother who only wanted to see her child happy. Now, all of it meant nothing. Inner circle sounded both closed and cruel. It wasn't just a guest list, it was a wall between me and my son. I set the phone down, feeling as though it weighed 1,000 pounds. The room was still bright, but inside me there was a cold, hollow dark. "Did you not think I deserved to know sooner?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Aaron swallowed hard, eyes still fixed on the floor. "We just wanted to keep it simple, Mom. A small, private thing. You know how people are these days, minimalist." I laughed. A dry, brittle sound that broke through the air filled with the scent of orange peel and Kayla's cheap perfume. "Simple," I repeated. "How simple it must be to erase the person who raised you from the most important day of your life." Kayla stood shrugged. "Don't take it the wrong way, Nora. We still love you. We just wanted to keep it for the really close people." The word close slipped from her mouth like a velvet-wrapped insult. I didn't respond. Inside me, something cracked, but enough to know that something had just died. Maybe it was the last bit of trust I had left, or the illusion that my love alone could keep my son near. When they left, the door closed softly, and I stood there for a long time, staring at the 2 glasses they'd left on the table, the lipstick mark still on Kayla's, the light reflecting off the rim. I walked to the closet, opened the door, and saw the unworn dress hanging there. When I touched the fabric, it felt cold, like the skin of a stranger. "Inner circle," I whispered. Maybe I've been on the outside all my life without realizing it. Outside, rain began to fall gently. I listened to it hitting the roof, blending with the sound of my heartbeat. In those sounds, I knew something had awakened inside me, something I'd spent years silencing with wire transfers and polite smiles. I didn't know that tonight would be the last time I cried for them. Because tomorrow, whatever had awakened inside me would become something they could never control again. If you've ever been shut out of someone's life like that, stay with me until the end of this story to see how a woman rises from the place she was told she didn't belong. And if this story touches you, please leave a comment to let me know where you're listening from, and don't forget to subscribe so we can continue walking together through the journeys of Begin Again stories. I still remember clearly, it all started with the sentence, "Just help us for a few months, Mom." 3 years later, that temporary favor had drained every dollar I had saved my entire life. After Thomas passed away, I had nearly $50,000 in savings, enough to live a peaceful retirement in my small riverside house, plant some flowers, and visit old friends in Savannah from time to time. But then Aaron lost his job, Kayla got sick, and they moved into a small apartment in North Charleston, $950 a month in rent. "We'll pay you back once we're stable," Aaron said, his eyes so much like his father's that I couldn't bring myself to refuse. Initially, I made the transfer without a second thought. The second month, then the third, and it became routine. Every 15th, I stopped by Seafront Bank, signed the papers, deposited the money, and came home with the comforting thought that I had done the right thing. Then, when they called to say the fridge had broken, I swiped my card and bought a new one, $1,200. When Kayla needed a new sofa set, I chose a sleek gray model for another $2,000. They never asked about the price, only said, "Thanks, Mom, we'll pay you back." But those promises, like the phone calls that followed, always had an expiration date, and that date came the moment the money arrived. Once, I bought boxes of rice, milk, and canned food and drove them over. They weren't home, so I opened the fridge and put everything inside, hearing the dog bark and noticing the neighbor glancing over. I felt ashamed, as if I were an intruder, even though I was the one saving my son from going hungry. I remember the second Christmas, when I wrapped one of Thomas's old wristwatches to give to Aaron. But when I arrived, Kayla opened the gift and said, "Oh, that's nice, Mom, but Aaron probably prefers digital watches." I just smiled and said it was fine. At that time, I also brought a $75 Best Buy gift card. A few months later, Kayla had her wisdom tooth removed. The bill came to over $1,180, and they texted, "Mom, could you help a little? We'll pay you back." I sent the money again. I always believed that love meant helping, that when your children were stable, they would come back, hug you, and say thank you. But year after year, I received more receipts than gratitude. Every time I opened the mailbox, there were bank envelopes, statements, balance decrease notices, and my heart still whispered to itself, "It's okay, at least they're happy." Until one day, when I accidentally checked my account and saw only a little over $7,000 left, I felt fear for the first time. I remember sitting all afternoon at the dining table, my expense notebook open, every figure neatly written in Thomas's old fountain pen, $950 for rent, $250 for groceries per month, 3 straight years. I did the math quickly, over $36,000 just on rent and food. Add furniture, repairs, the car, the gifts, and it totaled nearly $42,000. I read those pages again and again, feeling as though I were reading my own indictment. I had carved away my own future just to keep the illusion that I was still needed. I remembered the morning after Thomas died, standing by the bed, holding his hand and promising, "I'll take care of our boy, no matter what." Maybe that promise is what has chained me for these past 3 years. I did take care of him, but not as a grown man. What I nurtured was dependence. I called it love, but in truth, it was loneliness dressed as kindness. Because if I stopped helping, I was afraid no one would need me anymore. Every time Aaron texted Mom, my heart bloomed like sunlight, even though the following message was always, "Can you send me some money?" He had never felt so weak. But that night, after hearing only the inner circle, standing in my own house, I realized those years hadn't just drained my savings, they had drained my self-respect. I had given so much that I'd lost myself. And in that moment, I knew, if I didn't stop now, there would be nothing left of me to call me. A week after the afternoon, I was excluded from the wedding. Just as I was trying to get used to the silence in the house, the phone rang. The name Kayla lit up on the screen like a fresh cut. Her voice trembled, though she tried to sound casual. "Mom, I think you forgot to transfer the rent. The landlord is threatening to evict us. We're struggling." I said nothing for a few seconds, just stared out the window where the maple leaves were falling slowly, as if time itself had stretched out to test my endurance. I remembered that afternoon, the way she'd said, "just the inner circle," with that same tone, that same sugary voice laced with venom. I took a breath, my voice so calm it surprised even me. "Kayla, I already told you, I only help the inner circle." On the other end, there was sudden silence so still I could hear the ceiling fan spinning. "Mom, what do you mean?" she asked, her voice smaller now. I smirked, no tears left, only something cold and bright rising in my throat. "I thought you, of all people, would understand. You were the one who taught me what inner circle means." I heard a sharp breath, Then her voice tightened, trying to stay polite. "Mom, I don't want to argue. The wedding's over. Please don't stay mad." "We're really in trouble," the landlord said. "If we don't pay this week, we're out." I glanced at the clock, the second hand ticking slowly, and replied evenly. For 3 years, I never forgot once. But today, I remembered something. No one gets to disrespect me and then come back asking for money like nothing happened. There was heavy breathing on the other side. Then Kayla's voice turned syrupy sweet, almost frightening. "Mom, I'm sorry. I know we were wrong that day, but you love Aaron, right? You don't want your son to end up on the street, do you?" I heard my son's name, but the image in my mind wasn't the blonde little boy who used to laugh while I baked cookies. It was a grown man, standing silent while his wife humiliated his mother. "Where is Aaron?" I asked. "He's embarrassed, you know how he is. He doesn't want you to be upset." I let out a soft laugh, the sound metallic. "Then tell him he doesn't have to pretend to be a good son anymore." I hung up before she could say another word. The phone screen glowed for a few seconds, then went dark, leaving the reflection of my face tired, but strangely calm. In my head echoed all those times I'd rushed to the bank in the rain just to make the transfer on time, all the times I'd cut back on my own medication to send them money, all the dinners I'd replaced with dry bread. I used to think love meant giving without question. However, I've learned that when people become too accustomed to receiving, love can turn into an obligation. That night, I sat at the dining table, my hand resting on the old expense ledger. I opened a new page and, with Thomas's fountain pen, I wrote, "Expenses today, 0. Gained, self-respect." I closed the notebook and looked around the quiet house. The familiar emptiness had changed. It was no longer loneliness, but space to breathe again. I knew Kayla would call back, she'd cry, she'd beg, but I also knew I wouldn't answer. Because I had finally understood, when someone only remembers you when they need money, they never saw you as a person, and they saw you as a bank account that they love. And I no longer wanted to be a bank. If you've ever been in that place, where love is turned into an ATM, stay with me until the end of this story, because this is where I learned to say no, and start living as a real human being again. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. Autumn sunlight slanted through the curtains, spilling across the kitchen table where bank bills, utility receipts, and my expense ledgers were stacked like evidence of a life drained $1 at a time. I brewed a cup of mint tea, set it down, then opened the notebook and took out Thomas's fountain pen, the last thing he left behind, still carrying the faint scent of old ink. I began to write down the numbers. Rent, $950 times 28 months, $26,600. Food and essentials, $250 x 30 months equals $7,500. Furniture, gifts, holidays, medical bills, and car expenses altogether more than $41,780. I looked at the total line and felt as if someone had stripped my self-deception bare. All these years I had called it kindness, motherly love, sacrifice. But staring at those cold numbers on paper, all I saw was a woman who had bought her place in someone else's life. I did the math in my head. If I had saved that much for myself each month, I could have gone to Italy, bought tickets to a concert in New Orleans, or fixed the leaky roof. But I didn't. I chose to keep transferring money to 2 grown adults who treated me like a talking wallet. I took a deep breath, opened the cabinet, pulled out my bank documents, organized them neatly, and grabbed my coat. It was time to redo the math, not on paper but in my life. Seafront Bank was only a 10-minute drive away. I remembered the jingle of the doorbell, the scent of air conditioning and paperwork, and the desk of Camila Delgado, the young manager who always remembered my name. "Mrs. Hale, transferring to Aaron again today?" she asked with her habitual smile. I looked at her and shook my head. "No, Camila. Today I came to stop." She froze for a moment. "You mean—" I nodded. "I want to cancel all automatic transfers, close any access I've ever granted, and open a new account that only I know about." While she typed, I sat still, listening to the sound of the keyboard like the rhythm of my own heartbeat adjusting after a long coma. Camila looked at me with a mix of curiosity and concern. "Are you sure? After 3 years? That's a large fixed transfer." Cutting it off suddenly might make things difficult for them. I smiled, my voice as light as a breath. Do you know the funny thing, Camila? It was never difficult for them. It was always difficult for me. She said nothing, then nodded and printed out the new forms, each sheet signed by my hand with a steady pen stroke. For the first time in a long while, my signature didn't shake. As I stepped out of the bank, the wind blew cold through my hair, and the sky was a clear blue. Standing on the steps, I felt as though I had just removed a tumor I'd been carrying for 3 years. Cars passed by, horns in the distance, and I just wanted to laugh a real laugh, not the kind meant to reassure anyone else. That afternoon, I checked my phone and saw a message from Aaron. "Mom, I heard this month's transfer hasn't gone through." I read it, then deleted it without replying. Instead, I opened my laptop and enrolled in an online painting class, something I had always dreamed of doing but never dared, because I saved that money for my son. I realized I had just made the first calculation of my life that wasn't about adding more weight, but subtracting everything that drained me. That evening, as I brewed another pot of tea, I looked around the kitchen, the same place that used to echo with calls saying, "Mom, can you help us just one more time?" Now it was quiet in a different way, silent but not empty. There was only the warmth of myself, the freedom to breathe with my own money and my own time. And under the soft yellow light, I whispered to myself, "I've done the math. Now it's time to live." It was a gray, damp Saturday afternoon. I had just returned from the farmer's market with a basket of red apples and a bouquet of lavender when I noticed 3 cars parked right in front of my house. One was Aaron's, one was Kayla's, and the third was a black one that was unfamiliar. My heart sank, a quiet sense of dread washing over me. As I walked closer, I saw the front door slightly ajar and heard voices inside. I stepped in, and the sight before me froze me in place. Aaron sat on the sofa, head down, Kayla pacing around the room like a caged lion, and a middle-aged man in a gray suit stood by my dining table holding a stack of papers, my bank records, and personal documents that I kept in the drawer. "What is this?" I asked, my voice higher than I expected. All 3 turned to look at me, and for a moment, I felt like the intruder in my own home. Kayla stepped forward, her lips trembling but her eyes sharp as blades. "Mom, finally you're home. This is Mr. Fenton, our lawyer. We need to have a serious talk." I stared straight at the man. "About what?" "About your financial and mental safety," he said smoothly. "Your son and daughter-in-law are concerned about your ability to manage your assets. They believe you may be showing signs of instability, so—" I cut him off, cold as ice. "So you broke into my house and opened my private files?" Kayla jumped in, her voice soft and sickly sweet. "Mom, don't misunderstand. We just want to help. You've been acting erratically, cutting transfers, not answering calls, and canceling our access to your bank accounts. Everyone's worried." Aaron lifted his head, his face a mixture of fatigue and fear. "Mom, I just thought maybe you need someone to help manage your finances. We're scared someone might take advantage of you." I looked at him, my only son, the boy who once held my hand when his father died, and now he was talking about financial guardianship, like I was some mental patient. "Aaron," I asked quietly, "who gave you permission to bring this lawyer into my house?" "Mom, please don't be angry. Answer me." My tone was so cold it startled even me, Kayla interrupted, grabbing my hand as if soothing a child. "Nora, please listen to me. At your age, forgetfulness is a normal part of life. We just want to make sure you're safe. You should sign a temporary authorization so we can manage things for you until you're better." I pulled my hand away and stared at her. "I'm not senile, and I don't need anyone's help to spend my own money." Mr. Fenton stepped in, his voice calm but chilling. "Mrs. Hale, we're simply following procedure. If your family feels you're no longer competent, they have the right to file for legal guardianship." I laughed, the sound echoing through the room thick with deceit. "Wonderful. 3 years ago, when I paid your rent, your dental bills, your sofa, and your fridge, I was perfectly sane. But now that I've stopped sending money, suddenly I'm incompetent? Or is it that you're the ones lacking integrity?" Kayla's voice rose. "Mom, you don't understand. We have responsibilities, bills, and loans. We need money," I cut in. "You need money. The only thing you haven't learned is how to earn it yourself." Aaron shot up, his face twisted between anger and shame. "Mom, don't say that. I'm your son." I looked at him, slow and deliberate, each word falling like a blade. "My son died the day his mother wasn't invited to his wedding." The lawyer cleared his throat, trying to regain composure. "Mrs. Hale, I advise you to calm down. If you refuse to sign the authorization, we'll have to proceed legally. The court can approve a guardianship order within 2 weeks." I walked up to him, grabbed the papers from his hands, and threw them straight into the trash bin by the door. "This is my house. I'm perfectly sane enough to know who's trying to rob me. Now get out. All of you." No one moved. I pointed to the door, my voice steel. "Out. All of you." Aaron stood, pulling his wife by the arm. "Let's go, Kayla." She turned back, spitting her final words. "You'll regret this. When you're old and alone, no one will be there for you." I looked her straight in the eyes and smiled faintly. "I'm already old, but at least now I'm not blind." The door shut behind them, the sound of engines fading down the street. I sat down, my heart pounding but steady. On the table lay one remaining page, a copy of the guardianship proposal, bold letters reading, "Reason, signs of mental instability." I crushed it in my hand, feeling for the first time the heat in my veins, not from fear but from awakening. They had declared war. And I, the woman they thought would break, had just decided that this time I would be the one who wins. The next morning, I wasn't afraid anymore. Only sharp, terrifying clarity remained. I brewed a pot of strong coffee, sat by the window, and watched the light slide across the wall, thinking about Mr. Fenton's cold face and Kayla's brazen eyes when she called me a confused elderly woman. It was time I had someone who knew the law better than I did. I took out Thomas's old notebook, flipped through the contacts, and stopped at the name Harold Whitmore, attorney. Harold had helped Thomas with inheritance paperwork more than 20 years ago. I dialed the number. "Nora Hale? My God, I thought you'd moved to Florida." His voice was warm and deep. I told him everything, leaving nothing out from the 4 words "inner circle only" to the staged guardianship attempt. On the other hand, he remained silent for a long time before speaking in a slow voice. "What you're describing is elder financial abuse, and it's illegal, Nora. You need to protect yourself, both legally and physically. I'll come by your house this afternoon." I exhaled, feeling my heartbeat steady for the first time in weeks. At precisely 3 o'clock, a gray Lincoln pulled up at the gate. Harold stepped out tall, silver-haired, holding a worn leather briefcase. He looked around and, as he entered, said softly, "You've been violated, haven't you?" Hard to believe, but I've seen it many times. Children trying to strip their parents of control to take their assets. We sat at the dining table, and he opened his notebook. "You need to do 3 things," he said firmly. 1. Change every lock in this house. 2. Open a new bank account at a different branch, absolutely confidential. 3. Draft a new will and legal power of attorney, voiding all previous access. I nodded, writing down every word. "And I'll help you file a petition for personal asset protection. If they push further, we'll countersue for trespassing and abuse." His tone softened. "But more importantly, Nora, you must understand, this isn't just about money. It's about your right to freedom. You're fighting to keep your own life." When Harold left, I stood on the porch, the wind cutting cold through my hair, but there was fire inside me. That evening, I made a to-do list. Call the locksmith, order a security package, install cameras, change bank passwords, each task written in a steady hand. The next morning, I drove to the hardware store on Riverbend Street. The owner, Mr. Summers, who'd known me since I used to come with Thomas, raised his eyebrows when I said, "I need to replace every lock, get the best kind, and install a fingerprint system." He chuckled, thinking I was joking. "Grandkids messing with the locks again?" I answered plainly, "No, my son." The words silenced him. He just nodded and called his son Ethan, the one who handled security cameras. Ethan was young and quick, arriving that afternoon with a large tool bag. As he inspected the doors, he said, "We'll install motion sensors on every window, and the alarm system connects directly to the local police. If anyone tries to break in, they'll be notified instantly." I nodded. "Do it all. I don't ever want anyone calling my name in my own house again." That night, after Ethan left, the house was tranquil, with only the wind and the hallway light casting soft shadows. I walked around, testing each new lock. The faint click sounded like confirmation that from now on, only I could enter my own world. I made a cup of cocoa, sat down, and watched the small flicker from the newly installed camera screen. For the first time, the silence inside the house didn't scare me. It felt like a fortress, a place where no one could knock on my door, demanding payment disguised as family love. A space just for me to relearn how to live, how to trust, and how not to open the door to those who once pushed me out. I looked up at the wall where Thomas's photo still hung and whispered, "You see, don't you?" I finally locked the door I should have locked long ago. 3 days later, I had just finished watering the lavender along the porch when the landline rang. The caller ID showed an unfamiliar number. I almost didn't pick up, but instinct made me answer. "Mrs. Nora Hale? This is Rachel Klein, a social worker from the Office of Elder Welfare. We received a report suggesting you may be suffering from psychological instability and could be under financial manipulation. I'll need to visit your home for an evaluation." The sentence was a velvet-wrapped knife, every word too precise to be a coincidence. I knew exactly who was behind it. "Who filed that report?" I asked, keeping my voice calm. "I'm not authorized to disclose the reporter's identity," she replied. I took a deep breath, feeling a cold current run down my spine. Kayla and Aaron had taken their dirty tricks to a new level, dragging the government into their attempt to declare me incompetent. "Miss Klein," I said, "you may come, but I'll have my attorney present, and please remember this is private property." 30 minutes later, the doorbell rang. A young woman in a beige office dress stood there, ID badge around her neck, wearing a smile that was half friendly, half probing. "We just want to make sure you're being properly cared for," she said as she pulled out a stack of assessment forms. I invited her to sit, then called Harold. He arrived 20 minutes later, carrying his usual calm demeanor and that old leather briefcase. "Miss Klein," he said, looking directly at her, "Mrs. Hale is my client. I need to see a warrant or an official authorization." Rachel hesitated. "This is just a welfare check, not a court-ordered inspection." "Then you're free to leave at any time," Harold replied smoothly but with an edge of steel. She swallowed hard, then tried to regain her bureaucratic tone. "According to the report, Mrs. Hale has cut off contact with her family, refused medical treatment, and shown paranoid behavior, such as installing surveillance equipment in her home." I met her gaze, calm as if reading a script. "I'm not paranoid. I'm defending myself against people who broke into my home and stole my documents. As for family, if your own children tried to declare you insane to take your pension, you'd cut contact too." Rachel turned a page in her notes, her hand trembling slightly. Harold set a thick folder on the table. "This is a compiled record of the financial abuse my client has endured over the past 3 years, including bank transfers, invoices, and witness statements. Would you like to review it?" Rachel skimmed a few pages, and her expression shifted from professional detachment to doubt toward those who had accused me. "Mrs. Hale," she asked softly, "do you manage your own finances?" I opened the drawer, took out my bank statements, tax records, and investment list, each neatly arranged. "I pay everything on time. I cook, drive, read, and take walks every morning. The only thing I've stopped doing is sending money to people who don't deserve it. If that's an illness, maybe the whole world needs to catch it." Rachel stayed quiet for a moment, then closed her folder. "From what I see, you are entirely competent. I'll close this case." She stood and bowed slightly. "I sincerely apologize if this visit caused distress. Their report appears to have been biased." Harold smiled faintly. "That's all right. Sometimes it takes seeing with your own eyes to know who's telling the truth." After she left, I sat down, feeling as though I had just won a battle without a single shot fired. Harold looked at me and said slowly, "You see, Nora? They're escalating. From lies to intrusion, now to legal and administrative assault. But they've burned their bridges. Next time, I'll file a counterclaim. I nodded, my eyes drifting to the window where the lavender swayed in the sunlight, its scent gentle but persistent. In this house now fitted with cameras, steel locks, a lawyer, and silence, I realized it wasn't just a home anymore, it was a fortress of awakening. And within that fortress, there was no longer room for anyone who used the word love as a weapon to strip away my deep-hair-tames. I thought everything had settled after the visit from the welfare officer, but only a week later, Harold called, his voice heavy as lead. "Nora, they filed a formal petition with the Brookdale County Court. They're requesting legal guardianship because you're no longer capable of managing your finances." I froze, holding a cup of tea that had gone cold without my noticing. "Guardianship?" I repeated, as if I needed to hear my own voice say it to believe it. "Yes," Harold replied. The petition states, "The son and daughter-in-law of Mrs. Hale request to be appointed by the court as legal representatives to ensure her assets are used appropriately. They've submitted witnesses, a doctor, and even pharmacy receipts." I sat down, a wave of shock spreading through me. "But I haven't taken any medication, Harold," he sighed. "I know, they forged it." The feeling of betrayal, sharper and colder than before, stole my breath away. Aaron and Kayla didn't just want my money anymore. They tried to strip away my identity, my autonomy, and even my name from my own documents. Harold came over that afternoon, bringing a copy of the file. On it were forged signatures and written statements from witnesses I had never met. One of them was Mr. Davis, the neighbor across the street, who once complained that my guest's car blocked his driveway. He wrote that you often yell to yourself, talk to the dead, and suspect your neighbors of planting listening devices. Harold read in a dry tone. I let out a bitter laugh. "Well, at least the part about the dead is true. I still talk to Thomas every morning, but I'm not crazy. I'm just in love." He placed a hand on my shoulder. "I know, but we need proof. An official psychological evaluation from an independent doctor. I've already scheduled one with Dr. Moore, a neurologist, for tomorrow morning." I nodded, my heart still pounding. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat at the table, rereading all of Aaron's old messages, the ones asking for money, the "I love you, Mom" wedged between transfer requests. They all formed a chain of emotional codes I had once mistaken for love. The next morning, I met Dr. Moore, a middle-aged woman with sharp but kind eyes. She asked me hundreds of questions, from memory tests to reasoning and social awareness. I answered each one with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. When we finished, she said, "You're not only lucid, Mrs. Hale. Your reflexes are faster than most people your age. I'll make sure to note that in my report." Harold squeezed my hand. "Good. We have a weapon now." But it wasn't over. That afternoon, just as he was preparing to submit the report to the court, he received news that Kayla had hired a new attorney, a man notorious for winning guardianship cases for children in elder estate disputes. His name was Porter Lang. "He's going to turn this into a spectacle," Harold said. "We need to prepare for a real trial." I looked out the window where sunlight fell across the lavender garden, the only thing I could truly call mine. A soft breeze carried the scent inside, calming the panic in my chest. "Harold," I said, "I've lived long enough to know the worst enemies aren't strangers. They're the ones who once called you family. If they want a war, they'll have one. But this time I won't cry." He smiled, half in surprise, half in admiration. "I believe you, and I promise we won't let them win." When he left, I locked the door, sat down, and placed my hand over my chest. My heart was beating fast, but steady, not from fear but from resolve. They wanted to claim the right to control my life. But I, who once raised a child alone through war and loss, would never let anyone sign my name on the rest of my life. That night, I lit a candle on Thomas's altar and whispered, "They think I'm weak, but they forget you once loved a woman who knew how to stand up. This time, I'll show them." After learning about the guardianship petition, I called Eleanor, the neighbor who had become my closest friend. After hearing everything, she simply said, "Come to my house tonight. There are some women you should meet." I went, and in her living room filled with warm golden light, 4 women sat around a round table with a vase of white magnolias in the center. "We call ourselves the Magnolia Circle," Eleanor introduced. "Women who were exploited, robbed, or coerced by their own families." They each took my hand in turn, every grip a quiet vow. Maria, age 68, said her son had forged her signature to withdraw her pension. Carmen, 72, almost lost her home after her daughter claimed she was senile. And Alfreda, 80, spoke slowly. "They called me a burden. Now I call them a lesson." We sat for 3 hours, sharing stories so similar they hurt. Mothers who provided all their lives, only to be cast aside when the money stopped. "When the money goes, the love goes," Eleanor said, "and that's when you find out who stays." I told them about Aaron and Kayla, about the lawsuit, the forged papers, the word mom now reduced to a debt request. When I mentioned the upcoming trial, Alfreda placed her hand over mine. "Don't tremble. The courtroom only legalizes the truth. And the truth is, you're not crazy, you're betrayed." She poured me tea, her voice firm. "We'll testify if needed. You're not alone." My throat tightened. The tears didn't fall, but warmth rose in my chest, the forgotten feeling of standing in a circle where no one wanted anything from me. After the meeting, I went home late. On the porch, the scent of magnolias lingered, and I remembered Eleanor's words. "People think older women are fading, but really we're just quiet before our final bloom." The next morning, while I brewed tea, Harold called. "I just got a statement from Mr. Gree, the pharmacist. Kayla tricked him into signing a fake prescription confirmation. He's ready to testify for us now." The news made me smile. One link in their chain of deceit had broken. That afternoon, the Magnolia Circle came to my house to help me prepare for court. Maria reviewed documents, Carmen organized the witness list, and Alfreda wrote a single sentence on a small piece of paper for me. "Don't let them define you by how they treat you." I taped it to the mirror in my bedroom. That night, as I sat by the window watching the wind move through the lavender and the white magnolias outside, I realized I was no longer afraid of the courtroom, or of Kayla, or of their slander. I had something they could never buy with money, faith, and a circle of women who had lost everything yet still managed to bloom. And I swore if anyone ever asked me what I learned from betrayal, I would say, that sometimes, only when everything is taken from you, are you finally given the strength to protect yourself. On the day of the hearing, Charleston was covered in a light rain, the drops tapping against the car window like the rhythm of my heartbeat, slow but steady. I wore the black suit Thomas had bought me for our 30th wedding anniversary, tied my hair neatly, no makeup, just a small pair of pearl earrings. Harold arrived holding a thick stack of files. "Ready, Nora?" he asked. I answered, my voice steady. "I've been ready since the day they walked into my house with their lawyer." The Charleston County courtroom was cold and bright, the scent of polished wood mixing with cheap perfume from the onlookers. Aaron and Kayla sat across the aisle, beside them, Porter Lang, the new lawyer, tall, confident, with the smile of a man who always expects to win. When our eyes met, Aaron looked away, while Kayla smiled that practiced, false smile. The case began. Porter opened sharply, each word falling like a blade slicing paper. "Your Honor, we intend to prove that Mrs. Nora Hale, age 72, has exhibited cognitive decline. She has shown erratic spending and severed family contact. She has been influenced by outsiders, specifically a group called Magnolia, which she believes is protecting her." Every word erratic, influenced, decline, struck my chest like a hammer. When Harold stood to respond, his voice was low and resonant, like a cello. "Your Honor, my client has not lost her mind, only her trust after 3 years of financial abuse. The only thing she's lost is her naivety." He presented evidence one by one, bank transfers, receipts, expense journals, and Dr. Moore's report confirming my full mental capacity. Then he turned to Porter. "Are you seeking guardianship to protect her, or to protect the money that's run out?" Kayla was the first witness. She cried with such precision that some in the gallery dabbed their eyes with tissues. "I only want Mom to get help," she said. "She's become isolated, paranoid, thinking everyone's trying to steal from her." Harold asked calmly. "Has Mrs. Hale ever been diagnosed with a mental or financial disorder?" "No," Kayla answered, her voice shrinking. "Has she ever been reported to police for threats or dangerous behavior?" "No." "Then you're calling a woman managing her own finances paranoid." Kayla fell silent, eyes fixed on her shoes. Aaron followed. My son, in a white shirt, black tie, looking remorseful but unable to meet my gaze. "I just worry about her," he said. "She's changed. She cut contact, refused to see me." Harold rose. "Mr. Hale, in the past 3 years, how much money has your mother sent you?" Aaron hesitated. "I don't remember." "I do," Harold said, lifting a page. 40. $1,780. Have you ever repaid a cent of it?" Aaron's face flushed. He said nothing. "Do you remember inviting her to your wedding?" "That was Kayla's decision." "So, in your dictionary, love means abandonment?" The courtroom murmured. Harold continued. "You said your mother changed, perhaps. For the first time in her life, she said no." Then Harold called Dr. Moore, Pharmacist Green, and Eleanor to testify. Each confirmed I was fully competent. When it was my turn, I stepped to the stand, standing straight, looking directly at the judge. "Your Honor," I said, "I once believed love meant giving without limits, but when you give endlessly, people start believing they own you. I don't need a guardian. I need peace." The room went silent, only the sound of pens scratching paper. Porter tried one last strike. "Mrs. Hale, have you ever felt isolated or manipulated?" I met his eyes. "Yes, by the people sitting next to you." When I finished, Harold gently squeezed my hand. At the end, Judge Miller, a silver-haired man with a firm, steady voice, spoke. "After reviewing all evidence and hearing all parties, the court finds no proof that Mrs. Nora Hale lacks mental capacity. On the contrary, the evidence indicates she is a victim of familial financial abuse. The petition for guardianship is denied." The gavel struck, sharp and final like thunder. I couldn't breathe for a moment, the tears hot in my eyes but refusing to fall. Aaron bowed his head. Kayla stood, face red, whispered something to her lawyer, and turned away. Harold looked at me, smiling softly. "Congratulations, Nora. You didn't just win a case. You defeated the shadow they tried to cast over you." I stood in the middle of the courtroom, the rain still falling outside, yet I felt as though I was standing in sunlight, free no longer under guardianship, free no longer defined. And for the first time, I truly believe that justice can come, late perhaps, but it still comes. 2 months after the trial, the house in Charleston that had once been a battlefield was now filled with a silence as deep as a well. Every morning, I still brewed my mint tea, opened the window and watched the lavender sway in the wind, but instead of feeling safe, I felt something else heavy. Every wall, every brick, every steel lock reminded me of the nights of tension, the threatening knocks on the door, the look in my son's eyes as he stood beside his lawyer. One June morning, I set my teacup down, opened my laptop, and typed the first line of an email to a real estate agent. "I want to sell this house." When I hit send, a lightness spread through me, like an old door inside my chest had finally been opened to let the air in. A few days later, the agent arrived at a woman named Sandra, about 50, quick and sharp-eyed. She looked around the house and said softly, "This house has history." I replied, "Sometimes history needs to move on so someone else can write the next chapter." Within a week, the house was appraised, photographed, and listed. I looked at the pictures online, the kitchen that had witnessed tears, the living room that had echoed with arguments, the porch where I last arranged magnolias, all now framed as selling points under good lighting. A buyer reached out immediately. A young couple, newly married, eyes bright, hands clasped. When they said this would be their first home, I smiled. "I hope you hold on to each other longer than I held on to this house." Harold helped finalize the paperwork, then asked, "Where will you go after leaving Charleston?" I answered without hesitation, "Savannah. There's the ocean, there's sunlight, and there are people who don't know I was once betrayed." At the end of the month, I signed the final document. The moment my pen touched the paper, a cool breath escaped my chest, as if I had exhaled an entire winter. Harold smiled. "That's it. You're officially free," I whispered. "I'm not selling a house, Harold. I'm buying back the sky." That afternoon, I drove out of Charleston, my small car filled with suitcases, old photo frames, and one pot of lavender. As I crossed the Ravenel Bridge, the wind whipped through, carrying the scent of salt and sunlight. I didn't look back. In the rearview mirror, the city faded into a thin trail of smoke. In Savannah, I rented a small cottage near the bay, with red roof tiles, a weathered wooden porch, and windows facing a sky so blue it looked close enough to touch. On my first day, I hung Thomas's picture on the wall, then pinned up the note Alfreda had written, "Don't let them define you by how they treat you." Every morning, I sat on the porch, drank tea, listened to the waves, and felt my body grow accustomed to the kind of peace that didn't need locked doors or lawyers. Eleanor called on video, saw me smiling, and said, "Nora, you look younger." I replied, "Not younger, just lighter." After we hung up, I stepped into the yard and looked up at the open sky, the sunlight glinting across the roofline. I realized that for 72 years I had lived inside rooms built from duty, obligation, and fear. Now, all that was left was me and a sky no one could ever put under guardianship. The first morning in Savannah, sunlight poured through the window like liquid honey, sliding across the table where my cup of mint tea was still steaming. I opened the door, and the sea breeze rushed in, carrying the scent of salt and the cries of seagulls, soft but enough to make me smile. The small cottage was quiet, filled only with the ticking of a clock and the distant sound of waves, as if reminding me that time was still moving, but this time, I wasn't being carried by it. I was living inside it. I walked along the bay, where magnolia flowers bloomed white on both sides of the path. An elderly woman was painting the landscape. When she saw me pause, she smiled. In Savannah, people come to forget their past, and somehow, they find themselves again. I replied, "Then I think I've come to the right place." At noon, I sat in a small cafe overlooking the sea, opened my notebook, and wrote the first line in the new chapter of my life. I am no longer the woman forgotten at her son's wedding. I am Nora Hale, the woman who learned to love herself enough to stop paying the price for someone else's love. I placed the page into an envelope and wrote on it, "Do not send just a reminder." Later that afternoon, Eleanor called. "Charleston papers mentioned your case. They said it's one of the first successful examples of elder justice." I laughed. "No, it's just a story about an old woman who found her self-respect again." That evening, I sat on the porch under the golden light, listening to the waves. The Savannah night sky was cloudless, the stars thick as scattered salt. I looked up, thinking of Thomas, of Aaron, of Kayla, of all the things that once broke me, now only fragments of memory, glimmering, harmless. I whispered, "You see, don't you?" I finally chose myself. On the table lay a letter from Harold. "Your accounts have been fully transferred, and the Magnolia Fund has received its first donation." I had set aside part of my money to help older women exploited by their own children because no one understands them better than I do. I closed my eyes and listened to the waves hitting the shore, like the heartbeat of a life beginning anew. I was no longer a mother, a wife, or a payer. I was simply myself, and that was enough. If this story makes you think of your own, tell me where you're listening from. Because sometimes, in seasons of loss, all we need is one story to believe that freedom has no age, and it's never too late to begin again. If you think that, leave me a message, share this story, and subscribe to Begin Again Stories. Because sometimes what we need most isn't a miracle. It's the courage to stand up and begin again, once more, in our own name.